Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today's episode is a guest expert interview with Dr. Michele Borba. She is the author of the book Thrivers, The Surprising Reason Why Some Kids Struggle and Others Shine. And this book covers 7 teachable skills that set happy, healthy, high-performing kids apart. We dove into a couple of these skills. I picked some that I thought were the most interesting to talk about from a peaceful parenting perspective. And it was a really great conversation. I think you're really going to get a lot out of it, and you're going to have some ahas, and you're going to see some things that you're already doing if you're following peaceful parenting. Dr. Michele is a educational psychologist, best-selling author, and Today Show contributor who has spoken to over 1 million participants on 5 continents and to countless media about child development issues. She blends 40 years of teaching and consulting experience with the latest science to offer sound, realistic advice to parents and teachers and child advocates about helping children thrive. And you know, we are all about advocating for children over here, and I think you're just really going to enjoy our conversation. Boy, does she bring a lot of energy. I can see how she has, been talking to 1 million people on 5 continents because she really just had a lot of energy and a lot of great things to say for us as parents and caregivers. So have a listen. I'd love to hear what you thought about this episode. Please leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts and rate us on Spotify and rate us on Apple. That's how we reach even more parents and caregivers. And we're on a mission to really just change the world one family at a time with peaceful parenting. And we need that today more than ever. So please go over to your favorite podcast player, Apple or Spotify, rate us. And if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts, that would be amazing. Share this podcast with a friend who you think might find it interesting. Reaching more podcast people through podcast people is how we do it around here. So without babbling on any more about Dr. Michele, let's go ahead and meet her. So tell us, what are Thrivers?
Thrivers to me are kids who say, I got this. They have agency or a skill set. It has nothing, Sarah, to do with a child's zip code or their DNA or their temperament or their birth order. But the science is saying that a thriver, a child who's confronted with a challenge or a problem, big or little, doesn't quit or raise the white flag. They have the skill set to keep on going. And I think that is probably the most crucial thing in today's uncertain, kind of unpredictable world that we need to make sure our kids are equipped for.
So it's about resilience. That's what you're saying, really. Resilience, the ability. And we talk about this so much in my work too. And parents always want to know, how can I make my kids more resilient? So this is perfect. But I define resilience very similar to you as I've got this. It's not that things don't upset them. We talk about it a lot from an emotional health point of view. It's not that things don't upset them. It's that they know that they can handle it and that they can bounce back from difficulty and frustration. And you have to have that to do hard things, right?
Oh, you have to. And that's why maybe the first mantra of us is never do for your child what your child can do for themselves. So they slowly start to realize I can have little bits of control along the way, because we clearly know now that resilience is made up from experiences. So you can't coddle the child or rescue them. We have to give them those little experiences and dosages until they get that internal mindset that says, I can forge ahead. It's okay. It's despite how I feel about it.
That's right. That's right. Have you noticed a difference, the kids who are growing up in COVID or, from the past couple of years? What have you seen?
Yeah, Sarah, I started to see a difference in kids prior to COVID that disturbed me. And that's why I wrote Thrivers. At that point, I was looking at the CDC that said 1 in 5 American kids was going to suffer from a mental health disorder. And I began to look at the why. I saw the culture was really changing. We were all obsessed about making sure the kid got the GPA and the test score or the trophies. And we were kind of missing the whole kid. Then came the pandemic. And what we do know is any crisis usually amplifies a pre-existing issue. And it did, because now we're looking at 1 in 3 American kids. I
Wow.
came back from the Philippines, Abu Dhabi. It isn't just here; it's
Hmm.
everywhere, and it's just kind of spilling over. But even over the last 2 years, the CDC is telling us that 1 in 3 of our teenage girls contemplated ending their lives.
Oh my
So we're
goodness.
talking about very dismal stats that say, let's reboot, let's rethink
Hmm.
this. Doesn't mean we're going to end stopping to try to help our kids be successful in school. We
Hmm.
also need to help them be successful in life.
Yeah. And what I see so much is I was actually just interviewing somebody else for my podcast, and he was talking about a lot of bullying that he
Mhm,
experienced as a kid and like a
mhm.
young teenager. And he said that his parents were basically why he is who he is today, because even all of the hardship that he experienced, his parents were always there for him and always made him feel like there's nothing wrong with you, right? Like
Oh, I
this
love
isn't
that.
happening because there's something wrong with you. So I think as parents, we have so much in this, the scary 1 in 3 stat, but as parents, we have so much. We're so important in that in our kids' lives to like really help them be healthy in this, modern world with COVID and all the different crises that are happening.
Oh, and we need to confirm that to ourselves with a little inner self talk. Go, I got this as a mom
Hmm.
or as a dad. We now know when we really look at the science of resilience, and unfortunately, there weren't a whole bunch of parenting books out there that says, here's how you raise a resilient kid. That seems to be coming up now. But 3 things keep coming up as commonalities. One we talked about was those protective buffers, those little skills like problem solving or how to calm down or how to reboot or come up with a plan B or how to be assertive. I mean, there's dozens of skills that kids are going to need for it. But the other 2 things is that there's usually a place that the child can go to where he feels safe and secure. If not the home, maybe it's the school or the daycare center or the neighbor next door. And there's people. There's caring champions who are there for the child, who refuse to give up on them. And they usually model an I got this attitude as well. So the child picks that up.
I love
Really
that. That reminds me of there's a man named Josh Shipp. I don't know if you know
Yeah.
his work, his one caring adult, that every child needs one caring adult. And you're right, it doesn't have to be
Mhm,
the parents, but maybe it's a special teacher or a
mhm.
neighbor or a grandparent or, some other relative. I love that so much. It's so important for them to have their worth reflected back to them, right? For those kids to have their worth reflected back to them. Okay, so tell us about your I've printed out this lovely sort of cheat sheet about your character strengths, and of course we want everybody to read the book, but give us a taste of these character strengths and how to teach them. And I love how you've got it divided into 3 categories. You've got the nurturing a caring heart, developing a strong mind, and cultivating a determined will. So maybe we might choose one. I'm going to choose one from each category, and maybe you could
Sure,
like explain it and then maybe give some examples of what
sure.
parents can do in that category. Does that sound like a good
Oh,
plan?
absolutely. And the thing that we all need to know is that those were intentionally chosen because when we looked at the big picture, I was looking at the big picture of I was worried about mental health. So
Hmm.
what really helps a child in terms of being mentally healthier? But I also realized as a former teacher, hey, but I also have to worry about that classroom. Is it going to be something that helps them with peak performance and also resilience? And I found they all blend together. It's not
Totally.
one or the other. These are the
Well,
ones that are going to help our kids in all facets of their
and
lives.
that's why in the past few decades, they've been talking so much about EQ, right?
Yes,
Emotional
yes.
intelligence and empathy as those soft skills that you have to have. The big tech firms or the big good jobs now are not going just to the smartest people in the room, but the people in the room who also have those soft skills. And that's really what we teach in parenting too, right? Is we're helping kids develop the empathy, developing the communication skills and the self-regulation skills.
Oh, Sarah, I love you mentioned that because I just wrote an article that was asked by educators, ASCD, saying, can you write an article on how those seven help our kids in the future? And it was called Future Proofing Kids. And what I did is look at exactly what you just said. What are companies saying that they're looking for to help our kids be more employable and ready for life and work? The same seven keep coming up over and over again. So let's dive in so
All
we
right, let's
can
do
do
it.
a roadmap.
Okay, so the two categories you've got in nurturing, I'm going to just want to talk about all these, but we'll see where we get to. In nurturing a caring heart are self-confidence and empathy. Let's just I talk about empathy so much. People have heard a lot about that. So let's talk a little bit about self-confidence and why is that important?
It seems like it's the foundation for life. We got on the bandwagon of self-esteem where we felt like we had to praise our kids to death and give them stickers for breathing. But now what we realize is that one of the highest correlations to happiness and flow, which is that state of I'm not giving up and I'm keep on going in the workplace, is the child knows what their strengths are. So I think one of the greatest, most wonderful tools of a parent is to every once in a while tune into your kids, or maybe this week. One, if you have more than one kid, you'll need an index card for a child without them knowing you're watching. But tune into them and watch when this is called showing their talents, when they are a little bit more tenacious. What activities are they? When are they a little more eager to learn? Is there a need for that activity? They get excited when you say, okay, now we're going to do art, or now we're going to go on a nature walk. And you see that they're pushing you, you're not pushing them. They learn easier with that element. Those are the strengths. And when you can identify those strengths to a child, not what you want your child to be, but who your child is, you're actually nurturing your child's nature. What that has to do now, what we've discovered for mental health, is that children who develop a sense of meaning or purpose over their lives, not when they're two, but along the way when they're a middle schooler or a high schooler, or even us, when we know what we stand for and who we are, we're far more likely to be mentally healthier. So step one is figure out who your child is. Step two is look at the calendar and say, does he have time to devote to those? Many teens that I'm doing in focus groups say, I just don't have balance in my life. It's all about what looks good on my college resume. But the stuff that I need in order to really help me decompress, hobbies, healthy hobbies. It could be music. It could be band. It could be woodworking. It could be basketball. Doesn't make a difference what it is. It's healthy. And when you see the child engaged in it, stress level goes down. Amazing how highly the correlation of healthy hobbies are to resilience because they become coping strategies. And the child, because they feel they're kind of good at it, doesn't have to mean that they're going to win a Nobel Prize for it, but now they can go to it to help them cope with whatever comes their way.
What I love about what you just said is one of my favorite books for parenting. Do you know the book, The Self-Driven Child?
Yes, I love it. And I
Yeah.
love Ned.
I love Ned too. Ned's been on the
Ned's
podcast
cool.
twice. I wish Ned
Yeah.
was like my best friend. He's such a great guy.
Oh, he's
Anyhow,
wonderful.
they talk in that book about how when your child has an interest, even if you maybe don't personally see the value of the interest for something that can help them, have a better life as an adult, anytime your child has an interest and they experience the passion for it and they get into the flow state, even if it's about like building Lego or, making paper planes, or I'm thinking of things that little kids might get into.
Sure.
And then maybe, and they talk about how when your child has an interest and they're really dedicated to it, they're learning skills of like the perseverance. Their brains are creating those neural pathways for that focus. And that as they grow, they can transfer the skill set that they've learned from their passions and pursuits of childhood to things that they need as they're growing up. And what you were just talking about reminds me of that, like, being able to like see the value in a hobby, even if parents might be like, well, how's this going to help them, have a good life or whatever. But it's the act of participating fully with your whole self and getting that enjoyment out of it and learning those focus skills.
Two things on that I think are so critical as a segue to it. First of all, is that many people ask me of these seven that we're talking about, which one matters most? And I discovered it isn't any one. And resilience is not one skill. It's not one trait. It's a combination, and it's really a multiplier effect. So when you have that skill set, what'll also happen is the child will then be able to develop The third trait, which is self-control, it helps them regulate. The seventh trait is optimism, so we'll have hope for life. The sixth trait is perseverance. He's going to work on harder and keep on pushing through because he's doing something he's good at. Those are critical pieces to it. So keep in mind, parents, this isn't about one strength area and you're going to teach something called, okay, now I'm going to teach them the skill of resilience.
Yeah.
It's the experience. And one other thing that we do, not nearly enough, is focus on their strengths. 77% of the time we address their weaknesses because we're worried about them. But
Hmm.
the other thing that new research says is that maybe what we need to do is give kids more of a range of sampling experiences so
Hmm.
that we see what gives them joy. Maybe it wasn't ballet, but wow, she sure got excited when she hit that swimming pool. Maybe it wasn't that art class, but whoa, as soon as that drum set came out, he got, really motivated by it. And then looking the calendar and seeing, does he have time to devote to it? And finally, Sarah, alleviate the guilt because parents listening to this may going, oh my gosh, he doesn't have a hobby. Well, now's the time to start introducing them.
Yeah.
Find out what resonates with the child. Or many parents are doing hobbies as families together to just kind of help kids learn new experiences or see what resonates, and it can make a major difference on a child's life forever.
Yeah, and I love that you say, take away the guilt because it also sometimes it takes time for kids to find
Sure.
something that they really love. And I was just thinking of my own real world example of my middle son who's 19, and he was always like a passionate special interest guy that went from, Lego and Star Wars to
Yeah.
skateboarding to baseball, and then this past year he was on a gap year and he got a job working with a contractor, sorry, and he threw himself into this work that he was doing. And I
Oh,
saw him applying all of the passion and perseverance that he had in those hobbies when he was growing up. And he ended up getting promoted over after 3 months on the job, promoted over the other guys that had been working there, is like the star worker that this contractor like tells anyone within earshot what a great worker he is. And I really do think it's like all of the things that he developed through his hobbies that
yeah.
he was able to apply in the work world.
Yeah. And what also happened there is confidence.
Hmm.
Because it wasn't mom doing it for him. He was experiencing it and discovering it on his own. It gave him also a sense of purpose in his life, which is one of the best ways to reduce mental health and anxiety
Love
problems.
that. Love that. Okay, so looking at developing a strong mind, let's talk about self-control because that's something that a lot that comes up and in my community a lot as parents wonder
Sure.
how can we do you see self-control as different from impulse control or where do you.
I see them sort of the same thing. I see that self control really has different skill sets to it. You have to be able to focus. And that seems to be dwindling with all of us, including the grown-ups, because we're not tuned in as much. The second thing is we really have to be able to identify when our signs are, or a self-awareness of when it's starting to get a little bigger in life. Managing our time is a crucial piece, and then also being able to manage our stress. So all of those are going to help you with resilience because those are the staples to be able to help you learn any other trait. You can't persevere and hang in there unless you can put the brakes on your impulses.
Yeah, and maybe like keep doing the hard thing even though the easy thing is in arm's
Yes.
arm's reach. I have to put my
Yeah.
phone away when I'm reading even though I love reading. I love it. It's my favorite thing to do. But, the quick dopamine hit of the, "Oh, I wonder if anyone emailed me or liked my post," or whatever. I have to give myself a little self-control help by putting that phone
Well,
away.
you know what, Sarah, that's such a great point because so many parents right now, their biggest concern after COVID is, oh my gosh, now they've fallen behind and they're regressed in their learning. So, how do I, number one question, get them to be more persevering and motivated? And the key is you can't unless you have the ability to regulate because that comes first in terms of brain abilities. And then after a while, executive function is the higher level of thinking patterns here, but you can't get here without first levels of being able to just decompress, regulate so you can think straight. And that could be something we can also teach. Yes, each one of our kids' temperaments are a little different. Yes, some of them are a little quicker to anger and be a little more irritable. But one thing in common to all kids is that if you tune in, you'll see recognized stress signs in them before the exorcism hits. The biggest
Mm-hmm.
mistake we do is, they're sitting there having a mailing, flailing meltdown. No big people as well as little people are going to be able to listen to cognitive us trying to talk them through at that level. So watch your child. Maybe your next thing this week is tune in. Notice when they start to get irritable, and you'll
Mm-hmm.
see a pattern. They're not 24/7 irritable or stressed out, but you'll see a pattern. And that's, I think, what we miss in behavior. It could be some kids, it could be the trigger. It's always at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And you go, why? After a while, you go, maybe he missed the nap. Or maybe it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon and maybe he needs the snack. Or maybe it's 10 o'clock in the morning. And it's always, oh, that's the time of the time test. And that's what he's worried about. Just maybe track the child's behavior for a while. It can be a fabulous clue. And once you figure out that particular time, you can alleviate or help the child overcome some concerns. The second thing is watch the stress signs. If they're not the same, every kid has unique ones that I always tell kids it's one letter short than the word anger, is just add a D to it. Danger is what's going to help you. So let's look at it. Some kids, their little hands get like this, or their feet go up and down, or they start, rocking back and forth, or teeth grinding. We can feel it. Maybe our heart starts to patter a little more, or we start to feel a little lightheaded. Those are wonderful cues because you can change your self-control by first being aware of your signs and maybe what your triggers are, and how great as a family, not to make that be time out, but more like time in. Let's all work
Mm-hmm.
on identifying each other's, and what a gold mine that's going to be the rest of their lives.
I love that. And so the key to self-control, or one of the keys, is first identifying what puts your child out of control, or right,
Yes.
or losing control, helping them identify that for themselves too. Because I think a lot of parents in my community tend to have kids who are a little bit more on the
Hmm.
more challenging end of things. And I guess
Sure.
that's probably true. People who have easy kids don't probably listen to parenting podcasts or read parenting books, but a lot of those kids, they don't know how to identify within themselves when they're starting to feel
Yeah.
upset or stressed, right? And so they need a little help identifying those cues for themselves. And the first step is parents noticing for them, right?
And the next step is noticing them. The next step is responding calmly to let them know.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, the child will feel like they did something wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's not a learning, wonderful, valuable lesson. It's a discipline lesson, and it's not. It's a gold mine to be able to say, "Oh, I noticed that your feet are starting to go like this," and that's when you start to go a little more. Oh, that means, and now you can teach what to do instead. So it's
Mm-hmm.
it's the process of along the way. For some kids, it's a slow, deep breath, and you practice over and over again. These are skills, and they're never learned by you telling them. You got to show the child. And then once you figure out what works for the child, you got to keep practicing and practicing and practicing and practicing until your child can do it without you.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you said, I did a good job as my parenting.
Yeah, I one time my daughter we were at this store and she was going to use a gift card. You know, the American Girl
Yes,
stores?
I
Yeah.
love that store.
So we were at the American Girl store and she'd gotten a gift card for her birthday, and she spent, 2 hours choosing what she was going to buy, kind of thing. And she finally went up to the counter, and proudly, she was, I think, around 7, and she wanted me to stand aside. She waited in line by herself and she wanted to do it all herself. And she put her purchase down, and then she handed the woman her card, and the woman said, "Oh, honey, we don't take gift cards. We don't take those here. Those are only for the online store." And I was like, "Oh no." And my daughter, though, said, "I just need to take a minute." And she walked a few feet
Oh,
away over to the
oh,
side of the store and practiced her self-regulation strategies.
that's when you get yourself a spa treatment.
Yeah,
Way to go, mom.
I was so proud of her.
Those are the moment. I think the key on this is figure out what resonates with your child. Teens tell us the biggest mistake we do is they'll tell me in focus groups, we are the most stressed out generation. I said, okay, well, what would help? He says, giving us a repertoire of stuff, because that mindfulness works for some kids or that meditation works for others. Give us stuff and we can choose what works for us. Then we practice it over and over, because we got to learn it till it's, I love this term, sustained.
Yeah, that's perfect. Don't you think we should also just reduce the stress in their lives, though?
Oh gosh, yes. Yes,
Instead
we
of
just
just
have
giving
no
them ways to
time to
manage
just
it.
breathe and debrief. And I think that's the other thing when you said what happened of why 1 in 5 American kids is now suffering from mental health disorder. When I work in other countries around the world, Finland, do you know, the most literate country in the world, one of the happiest places on earth to live, says UNESCO. Very, very low homework, if not at all, none, because they do it in class. By the way, they don't have all the extra stuff. They think that the kid needs to go home and just debrief and learn to just enjoy your own company. And they also have pretty darn good mental health statistics about their kids as well. It's a
Nice.
reset on how they're raising their children.
I'd be interested to see if there are any different statistics with teenagers in Canada versus the US because, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I grew up in the US. And so I went through the whole college
Mhm.
application process that, there.
Mhm.
And then I've had 2 of my 3 kids have gone through the college application process in Canada, and it is so different.
Yeah.
Unless they're applying to US schools, that is, but applying to Canadian universities, kids are not starting in grade 8 building up their resume of all of the things that is, they're not doing every single sport, every single club. They're in most cases, the only grades that count towards their college applications are their last year of high school. And I've seen such a difference in terms of the stress loads
Yeah.
on my kids and their friends because of that difference in the college or university application process.
Sarah, I've seen that personally myself. I've worked in every province except one. I did work way far north in the Yukon territories, but I clearly was seeing a more progressive society that was taking their kids' mental health and needs up a notch, and it wasn't such a frenzy. So
Hmm.
the kids were far less stressed, and it had in very many places more of a village tone. So people were helping each other, and I think that's what we got to get back on.
Totally. All right, let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about one more of your character strengths. So, you know what I want to talk about? I want to talk about optimism.
I knew you were going to say that, and me too. It's like, aha,
It's
that's
so
what
hard right
we
now. Sometimes it
need.
just hits me like when I hearing about the global warming and like the wildfires in Alberta and income inequality. And, my kids tell me like the world is so different from when you were growing up. And
Mhm.
sometimes I just think it's so hard to remain optimistic and still have knowledge of what's going on in the world. So, how can we help our kids with
Well,
that sense of
I think the
optimism?
first thing is we do need to be aware it is a different world. And when you're going, many parents are going, well, I went through a lot of problems in my life too. The big difference is the images our children are seeing are far more graphic, they're more visual, and they're instantly accessible. Where our parents could turn off the TV, what's happening now is just front and level. It's coming down to just tragedy of tragedies, from Ukrainian war feeds to shootings to, oh my gosh, horrible. And you keep seeing that. What it creates, just to be aware, it's called mean world syndrome. It
Okay.
makes the child develop an image that the world is a mean and scary place, and there goes hope. And there goes, as a result, one of the highest levels of what causes mental health problems. If you see the world as hopeless and you're helpless, there goes pessimism becomes your operating premise. Everybody's going to have a bad day. And I am not saying here we need to be raising Pollyannas. They got to have a reality base that this is tough and we've gone through some tough times. But if you always have a pessimistic view that everything is going to be bad, it's permanent, pervasive, and personal, then it robs hope. That said, we now know from fabulous stories, particularly at the University of Penn, in terms of the research they're doing, that we can teach optimism. And how do we do it? First, be aware of what you say, because whether you know it or not, your kids do listen to you. They may not always think that you are doing it. Watch it. One of the simplest things that I've seen parents do that I would suggest you do is come up with maybe a family mantra. How do you handle stress? if you have a bad day, and it doesn't mean you're going to have in one of those, everybody stop, I'm okay, listen to mom. Instead, what you do is just simply say out loud how you feel. It's okay. I got this. I can handle it. And if you say that just simply over and over, your voice becomes your child's inner voice. They eavesdrop on your conversations. They need something to catch the worry, to talk back to the negativity. And one of the simplest ways is that. I would also be very wary of, beware of what your children are watching. Middle school kids now say the scariest thing for them is late breaking news without a parent there to help them
Mm.
see it through. I got to the point where I realized what it was doing to me personally. I turned off the news and subscribed to something profound called the newspaper, because the research was saying just the print is far better. I do need to get the information as opposed to the graphic image. You can also do something I don't think we do nearly enough, and that's expose your kids to the good stuff in life. Anytime there's a crisis, the kids hear the crisis of the climate change or the war or the battle or the shooting. But what they don't see in every crisis is people coming together.
Mhm.
So, one of the things you may want to do is show them the good parts about humanity. Go to the newspaper and cut out the good things that people are doing for one another, and they always are. I mean, my favorite story after 9/11, imagine something positive about 9/11, is there were the towers coming down, and there was the whole New York City in just flames and people running for their lives. And they ran and they ran and they got to the Hudson River, and now they're trapped. Well, what happened was that they realized that they were trapped. And so the National Guard sent in a plea for civilian boats. The
Mm.
story that kids don't hear is that over 9 hours, 500,000 boats, the largest single civilian rescue on record anywhere, and rescued 500,000 New
Wow.
Yorkers. Now,
Wow.
see how great to put those on index cards and have
Mhm.
those as every night around your, hey, look at this that just happened. Stories about children. They're wonderful stories about real kids just doing great things. What happens is kids see and hear the story. I tell them when I do assemblies at schools, and the kids come up to me with tears in my eyes saying, thank you. Now I know what to do. Like Christian Bucks. I love that child in Philadelphia who was so worried at second grade about so many of his friends outside on the playground who didn't have anybody to play with. He said to the principal, can't we just put a bench there? So if you got a problem, you sit on the bench, and all the rest of us will keep looking on the bench to see if anybody needs a friend. And they call them buddy benches. Well, that school got a buddy bench. But the most wonderful thing that I don't think, realize is that the news went viral about Christian. And I can't tell you how many schools I visited in the world. Saudi Arabia now has a buddy bench because they read the story. Kids read the story and say, we need a bench.
I
That
love
just
that.
uplifts your heart.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
the hope for the world. And we need to help kids realize, yeah, it's always going to be some bad stuff, but the rest of the stuff is good stuff. And if you keep that mindset, wow, what a difference.
Yeah, and I love that, we have to watch ourselves too, because I think as adults we can also get bogged
Yeah.
down by all
Yeah.
of the bad news. And you reminded me of that Mr. Rogers quote
Ah,
about looking for the helpers. Like
well,
whenever there's a tragedy or something
yeah.
hard, always look for the helpers.
Yeah, I did. In fact, Mr. Rogers is in chapter 7, along with dozens of stories that I picked up that kids said, put this in the book, put this in the book. Stories that resonated with children that we should be reviewing. And then what the research says, we can boost optimism. There's one more idea, Sarah, that I love, and it came out of a study in New York, that we can, as parents, as a family, describe ourselves as a resilient family. And how you do that is begin to tell your children stories about their grandparents or their great grandparents, what they endured and how they got through. I don't care if it's World War II or Ebola or polio. Hey, your grandparents or your great grandparents had some tough times, but look what happens. We are a resilient family. What happens is the child begins to adopt that. I guess I can do it because I'm being raised in the right kind of family. We're a resilient family.
That's
Going,
right.
yes.
Yeah, we can handle this. I love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this. And I love how you blend the theory with the concrete so well. And I can tell it's just all the experience that you've had and all the children and families that you've helped. You're going to help our community as well. So
Oh,
before I let you go, two questions. One is where's the best place to go for people to find out more
oh,
about
thank
what
you.
you do?
Yeah, first of all, my name is Michele Borba, but the most important thing, I'm a 1L Michelle.
I know I spelled your name wrong in the
Oh,
link and
don't worry about
apologize.
it. Borba rhymes with Zorba. So you can go to my website. There's dozens of free downloads. Amazon or Barnes and Noble or any place has Thrivers in digital audio form. It has lots and lots and lots. That's what I wanted to do of ideas that you can do. Everything is grade leveled, but don't try all of them or your kid will never let you listen to another podcast.
You'll add all the stress back into their lives if you try and do
Yes,
everything,
instead
right?
find one thing that's going to work for your family. And that's what you do. And that's how we make a difference is one little thing and keep working on it over and over again until it becomes a family habit.
We'll put links to your site and your books in the show notes. And so the last question I'm going to leave us on here is a question that I ask all my guests, which
Okay.
is if you had a time machine, you could go back in time to your younger parent self, what advice would you give yourself?
I'd give myself calm down. It goes by a lot faster than you think. My mother always told me that. But instead, I would be asking myself, hey, what really matters? What
Hmm.
really matters? And find the little things and the skills along the way and keep reinforcing that. My kids are old and grown now in their 30s, but the fascinating thing is they don't talk about all the stuff that I did. They talk about the fun memories, the simple little routine things we did over and over again. They still remember the darn tickle hallway where they'd come in from school and I'd stand at one end of the hall and they'd run as fast as they can because the tickle monster was there, which meaning me. Go figure that that's what they'd remember about everything else. But simple little repetitive things create strong families, resilient kids because they have that memory of we were a family, we got through it together, and that's how we're going to get through all of this together.
I love that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.